I kick the door open, leave everybody in the dust, and I'm running for my life because I'm feeling I'm going to pass out and die. 30% of my skull is like plastically press on nail and 3D CT scan, and they made it. And like, I am the bionic man. I start dabbling in psychedelics, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and all these evolutions of who I was. It's like, it helped me become who I am. The second night, I was like, oh man, I don't know shit. I don't know anything. Everything now in my life is a theory for me to engage, explore. And if it's fear, if I find fear in something, that's how I know to lead into it. Right now, the future of psychedelics is making it more normalized, more accepted, more understandable, while not stripping away some of the most powerful aspects of it, which is...
Are you frustrated with the American school system and the way that it seems to just be built on an obedience model where it exchanges curiosity for compliance? Well, I was too. And through a grant from the Heterodox Academy, Zachary Cresswell and I created a curriculum based on understanding critical thinking. It's absolutely free and it's available at williamroosh.com/critical thinking. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles, trying to bring viewpoint diversity to a whole slew of different topics. And we can dive into a couple today. Today is a good friend of mine. We could dive into a whole bunch of different kind of avenues for where to go with this. But he is a Marine. He's a breathwork and trauma coach. He's also what you could call a psychonaut with psychedelic plant medicines and psychedelic drugs and stuff like that. Really interesting person with an interesting story. My good friend, Dave Casler. Dave, it's nice to see you.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, this is going to be cool. I think we can go into a lot of different things here. So first of all, your background coming from like a military family, getting into the Marines, and then going through traumatic brain injury. Like there's a lot there that I think is kind of like a good place to jump off from for how you got into all the other stuff, because you're a weird guy in the best of ways. But it's like you're a Marine who served in combat and you're like a really soft hippie. And it's a very strange mix. It's a beautiful mix of the different ranges of like the human experience. And this is a viewpoint diversity podcast. So I think that there's a lot of different things that I can pick your brain on from different perspectives and stuff like that. So just bring us in, introduce yourself to my audience so that they can get a feel for who you are, where you come from, and things like that.
Yeah, so I've gotten to the point where in my life, I consider myself a Renaissance man because I'm like a jack of all trades, a master of none, but seeking to be a master of everything I touch, or just at least well-versed. So it's just been a wild ride to be that kid that was very self-conscious in high school and transitioned into the Marine Corps, which gave me a lot of self-confidence, maybe too much, and then leave the Marine Corps, do a consulting, contracting in Iraq, get blown up, lose who I was once again, and then go through a divorce, lose who I was once again, rebuilding. There's just a lot of resilience that I've been forced to learn.
You just kind of glazed over. You said you were blown up. Like I know a bit of the story. Can you share just like what that story is for us? When you say you were blown up, that's literal. That's a literal thing from an IED.
When I was in Iraq as a security contractor, my whole job was PSD, private security details, executive protection, and on a mission where we were going to pick up our VIPs.
Were these like government officials or?
Yeah, Halliburton.
Yeah. Okay.
VPs and officers from the Halliburton Corporation.
Okay.
Indirectly tasked with that.
And this is in Iraq?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and like, I don't know how deep of the story you want me to go into, but basically we found ourselves as a target of opportunity. Vehicle, VBIED, suicide bomber, detonated into our convoy, and I was in the far rear vehicle. When the convoy stopped at like the roundabout, speed is key. Like we never stop. If we have to bulldoze vehicles and it gets hairy, but you never stop. When you stop, you become a target of opportunity.
What are you in? Are you in Humvees or are you in like
we are in
Suburbans or something?
Up armored Tahoes.
Okay.
And when we stop, this feeling of anxiety shot through me, and I'm gun out the window, sectors of fire, and I turned to say sit rep, and I woke up, everything's on fire. I go to say sit rep again, situational report. That's kind of like I slang for like, what the fuck is, when I said sit rep, nothing came out but, oh, I try to say it again, oh, and my brain, I didn't know that I had sustained a brain injury. Like metal fragments flew through the glass, hit me, knocked me out, unconscious. I wake up, everything was on fire. I'm trying to grab semblance of reality and what's going on, updating myself, my brain, and I went into shock because I couldn't understand where I could think everything, but nothing was coming out. Called aphasia. And my buddy, the vehicle leader, saw it and jumped out, grabbed my back strap, literally pulled me out and grabbed my hand and put it on my head and said, "You're bleeding, apply pressure, keep it there." And I'm just glazed over.
You remember this?
Oh yeah. And he got me, like pulled me, got me to the alley, and then our car exploded. The rear gunner had jumped out, left his grenades over the gas tank. The heat cooked off the grenades cooked off the gas tank. And so he literally saved my life. And I remember holding my head, being in the alleyway, looking at our Iraqi driver, and he's just like shredded from the glass, and thinking, he's really messed up, really bad. And I gave him like this thumbs up. I'm going to hold my head, giving him the thumbs up, and he's giving me the thumbs up. And then another blast, something goes off, which is pushing us now deeper into the alleyway. And all of a sudden, I've lost my team because they're going back and trying to save other team members. That bomb detonated in the worst possible place. So there's kids injured, there's Iraqis injured, everybody's injured.
Civilians
injured. And so I find myself pushed back into an alleyway, and now there's Iraqis with guns running around, and they're trying to take me and put me in like a shop or in a house. I don't know what it was, but I remember if I'm dizzy, I'm losing consciousness. If I go in there, I'm going to die. That was my fear. I'm going to pass out. Nobody's going to be.
Were these Iraqi soldiers the bad guys?
Mm.
Okay.
When in general, in combat, in everyday life, you identify with the hands first. So identify with the hands. Weapons. They have weapons. Now identify temper and intent. So now I'm looking at their faces, trying to gauge their temper and their intent, their emotional, and I'm seeing that they're armed, but their temper and intent is helpful. So they're trying to help me. They're not a threat to me at this point. And I'm literally just pushing them off because I'm afraid if I go in there, I know they're trying to help me, but this could lead to my death, my fear. And they finally are like, yeah, don't, like, they left me alone. And all of a sudden, I just remember that alleyway getting quiet. And I don't remember anybody in that alleyway. And the fear was, I'm going to die. And then I looked up to the sky and I'm like, God, let me see my kids, my 2 girls, just one last time. Then you can take me. I'm totally prepared to leave, but just don't let me go out with my girls.
You're pretty young at this point too.
Yeah, about, I think 28.
Yeah.
And when I said that, when I felt that, all of a sudden my team comes around the corner, like the A team, and they grab me. They had hijacked an Iraqi police truck, threw me in, and we are rushing to the green zone in Baghdad, and I'm passing out, and I'm beating on the Iraqi driver, like faster, but nothing's coming out. Like, we get into the green zone, we get to the hospital, and I remember just last week I was in that hospital. It's an L shape, and I kick the door open, leave everybody in the dust, and I'm running for my life because I'm feeling I'm going to pass out and die. So adrenaline is kicking in. I'm running through the hallways, holding my head, bleeding, thinking, why isn't anybody stopping me and helping me? Like, I'm passing by nurses who are like horrified. And I'm just thinking, I'm just going to run. Like, I'm going to run until somebody stops me. And I hit this L, and I know it's an L, and there's a dead end. I hit the L, and all of a sudden I saw a doctor at the end of the passageway with his hands open, like beckoning me. And I remember, I'm going to live. The adrenaline just shooting through my body. One last push. And I remember tackling him and passing out. I woke in Germany, and 2 years later, I'm talking to my Navy SEAL buddy who was behind me. And I said, hey, man, like, that was a really crazy day. We lost 2 good guys.
In those explosions?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Brandon and Todd. And I said, I would really love to meet that doctor. If it wasn't for him, I thought I was going to die. But when I saw him, I'm like, I'm going to live. And my buddy says, what doctor? Yeah, the doctor at the end, like, white coat. He's like, Dave, there was nobody. You just ran until you passed out. And then the crash cart team, like, doctors, and took you in for brain surgery and, like, flighted you to Germany. And when I tell that story, like, it's up to anybody who did, like, I don't know what it was. God, higher power, my own imagination. But being the psychonaut that I am, I just love to think of it as the higher, source energy, our higher angels, our higher self. But yeah.
Now you have the half a plastic head.
Yeah, like 25-30% of my skull is like plastically press on nail and 3D CT scan, and they made it, and like I am the bionic man.
Yeah. Wow, man. I never heard that in so much detail. How do you feel? Is it okay telling that story because you've told it enough times? Or is it still hard for you to, like, talk about that?
No, but I did find myself getting choked up, and even right now when I say Brandon and Todd. Yeah. Interesting.
You were so close. That's
because it's been so many years.
Oh, these are guys that you served with for a while.
These are guys that I met when I was doing private security that were just like the best of the best. And that's, in the private security sector, contracting, it's big boy rules. So it takes a lot to get into these companies, and even more to stay in them, because everybody wants that job. It's high paying. It's a big boy. You're in the big leagues. Nobody's looking over you and checking you, and you show up like how you play.
Great equipment, everything. That's what I've heard. Yeah.
I saw a lot of guys that got the job, but within a week, it's like, he can't handle the op tempo. I don't trust him. You're gone. Next guy that wants your job. So these are guys that I worked with, served with, multiple different companies. The best of the best.
So from there, soldier, legitimate, like, hardcore, shooting guns, shooting out of windows, explosions. Then you transition to being a breathwork coach. How do you make that leap from being met 10 years or more after your military time?
Or more.
Yeah, maybe 15.
15, yeah.
So all I know from you personally is who you are now. How did you make that transition? It's like, I know you well enough that I could see you getting, tapping into that Marine stuff that you still are, once a Marine, always a Marine thing. But how did you make the transition then from soldier to, did it start with breathwork coaching that where it started? Or how did this whole thing get going to your kind of like second half of your life? Like, you were so close to dying, and then you have this whole new resurgence of like a second chapter. Second half of the story is very different. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, when I look back at, currently in my life, everything seems like a lifetime ago. Instead of a lifetime ago, it's just a different life. So the evolution of my consciousness has said that this is me now. In order to be resilient and change and be something different, what is exactly do I want to be? Like, I don't identify as David the Marine. I identify as David who is a Marine. And that was a long time ago. Once a Marine, always a Marine, but I don't identify as that. So I'm constantly changing my identity to fit my consciousness. So after, I left the Marine Corps because I was disillusioned with the leadership. And I was going through like a really rough time in my relationship, and I didn't see any like people that gave a shit. And I really gave a shit as a Marine. I really cared about the men I led. And I actually thought that was something that was weak of me, because my leadership would be like, you're being too nice, you're being too this, you're being too that. And I just was the Marine my father was, that I saw and inspired me to be a Marine. And so when I left the Marine in disillusionment, got into contracting, got blown up, now I'm finding myself like, I'm never going back to contracting. I'm never going back to running and gunning. And that's who I am. Like, that's my identity. Yeah. I'm an anti-terrorism specialist, infantry, Marine, executive protection specialist. All these things that I found myself highly, once again, disillusioned, because I'm not that anymore. I can't claim to be that. I can claim, but I'm not that anymore. So who am I?
Yeah.
And in the worst parts of my depression, it was, who are you now, but who do you want to be? So I started writing poetry. That was my way, using my brain injury abstractly to identify my feelings, and and then I went through a really bad divorce, and that was tragic. And I was like, oh, who are you now? Guy with an ex-wife, 3 kids, and a brain injury. Who is going to love me?
Yeah,
that hit me. Like, who is going to love me? And I found a woman that loved me, and we built an empire. We built, a life and 3 great kids. I have 3 other great kids, and then I got divorced. And once again, who am I? What was I? Who am I going to be now? So in that process, I started dabbling in psychedelics, psilocybin, went to Rhythmia and did ayahuasca, and all these evolutions of who I was. It's like, it helped me become who I am. And that's still ever changing.
Yeah, I had a Navy SEAL, Chris Beck, on, and he talked about how he had from like CTE, from like blowing up doors and stuff, like just the concussions that happen, like just repeated over time. And he was saying that he talked about the exact dosage of like psilocybin mushrooms that helped reconnect the brain synapse. Because one of the things that's interesting, Michael Pollan goes into in his book, Andrew Huberman has talked about it, and other people, is what psychedelics can do, especially something like psilocybin, is it kind of opens up these pathways. So now you can, that's what like part of the trip is you can like almost like see, smells and hear colors and stuff like that. Like, it starts to make these connections. So parts of your brain have been damaged. You can actually regenerate your brain. Like the idea that drugs are neurotoxic, some are, alcohol is, and stuff like that. And some, even things that be considered psychedelics, could be to some degree, but some of them are also regenerative.
Definitely.
Did you use it for that? Did you see any element of that? Or was it for more of like, not the more like hard science, let's fix the brain synapse, but more just like self-discovery and trying to get in touch with who you are and who you want to be?
Yeah, it's funny because when I started doing like cannabis, I was 29.
Yeah, because you never did it. I mean, a lot of my military friends, they're pretty straight-laced, especially when they're in there. You get drug tested too.
Oh, yeah.
And so, they're very like straight-laced. They don't... Alcohol is great. You just get blackout drunk. But when it comes to like even smoking weed or something like that, it's like, no.
Yeah, I had responsibilities, a secret clearance, all these things that really, and I didn't have the desire to do it. So I was very disciplined, always been disciplined my whole life. But then when I got out of the Marine Corps and had my brain injury, it was like, why not? Like, why not push myself? And it wasn't neuroregenerative. It was like, okay, I've never tried cannabis. I tried it. And now I'm freaking out because my right arm is going numb, and that's my trigger for having a seizure. And when I got past that fear of having a seizure, I can actually enjoy it. And now, like, what I, move through psychedelics with people and host, people with psychedelics, a lot of it is me talking about the beauty of psychedelics and plant medicine, not drug, is if you've never done it, to meet your own fears. And when we meet our own fears, our level of fear, and can face it and address it, what we find out most of the time is that you're afraid of nothing. We're afraid of a thought that somebody else talked about when they got high and they freaked out and saw killer clowns, and that's their level of consciousness. So when you do psychedelics, you will meet your level of consciousness where you're at. There's many different levels of consciousness, but you meet yourself where you're at. And I don't prescribe psychedelics for everybody, because everything is a construct: talk therapy, yoga, weightlifting, psychedelics, cannabis.
Yeah.
you get in where you fit in, and what works for you works for you. And if you want to push the boundaries, like the shamans in life and Buddhists, everything is like, you don't have to do anything. You're already perfect. Know yourself. I'm not here to fix anybody. I'm here to fix myself, if anything, and be the love and light and the healed person that radiates that, wow, what is he doing? I want to do what he's doing. Or the example. I don't want to do what he's doing, because that looks fucked up and he's destroying his family. Like, I'm not going to be like that guy.
Yeah. So I want to get back to breathwork, but just while this is like all the kind of the topic is like you mentioned, I guess essentially being like a trip sitter, like being a guide, being like just like someone, a facilitator. Psychedelics are something that my whole life I was very, very scared of. Very scared. I was like, I'm barely sane as it is. If I do this, then I'm going to become insane. I think the propaganda worked to some degree. I think also if you are like, have things in your brain, like, I don't want to open up that box because there's some crazy stuff in there that and you shut it out. Part of what happens is it opens you up, and people can have bad trips. I think by like the science would say it's essentially a panic attack.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stories from like the 1960s where people be like freaking out and they come in and doctors would be like, look, there's people with real problems, so just like go relax. But how can you explain like the idea of having a bad trip, and then what can prevent that? I think that's a really good thing for people who are thinking about this. It's becoming more mainstream, psychedelics and stuff like that. But how can you protect against having a negative experience turn into a positive experience? And then what are the best ways to kind of set up a psychedelic experience? What kind of like setting and all of that kind of stuff, or references that people can look into and things like that? Because what I know about you and having, experiences had experiences with you as well. And like, it's a very positive experience. You kind of know what you're doing. You bring like, there is like it's woo woo, but like an energy that matters when you're in those situations. The idea of doing a psilocybin and going to the mall or something like that would not be very pleasant, but sitting on a beach by a campfire might be. So like,
yeah.
What are some things that people can do to have a more positive psychedelic experience?
So I'm in the camp and I reserve the right to be wrong, that there is no bad trip.
All right. I like it.
You get the trip you need, not the trip you want. And I'm stealing that from Burning Man. Like everybody says that, you go to Burning Man, you get the burning that you need, not the burning you want.
Or a flood.
Yeah, the flood. Yes. Or the dryness and the wind. So I don't particularly subscribe to any trip being bad. You're meeting yourself where you're at. And if you're in a dark place, you're going to meet that dark side. And that's the duality of life. Because in order to move through the shadow, you have to first realize it's there and embrace it. And the best like metaphor or story I can give you is I went and saw my nieces, and I love my nieces. Like, they are the world to me. And Gloria, I don't know if she's like 3 or 4. I'm bad with numbers, but she comes down and I'm like, hey, Gloria, how you doing? And she gives me a hug and she's like, Uncle Dave. And she says, I'm afraid of monsters. And I'm like, oh, really? And I set her down and said, what scares you about monsters? And she's like, well, they're scary and, like they're ugly. And I said, I think monsters are really loving and normal, like, and want to be loved. But because of the way they look scary. So people think they're monsters. And if you treat anybody like they're a monster, eventually they're going to become a monster, because that lack of love and the fear that overrides the love, we're all dealing with more fear than love in general. And I was like, monsters just want to be your friend. They want friends. They want love. And her eyes just like lit up. And I said, if you're a friend to a monster, they'll be a friend to you, and they're not that scary. And just watching her release this fear of monsters in order to understand a different reality was that paradigm shift that we all go into when we're doing medicine. It's like plant medicine or medicine in general. Like, it's scary the first time you do it. It can be scary the second time you do it. When I went and did ayahuasca the first time, the next day I was like, I don't think I need to go a second time, because I know it all. Like, Mother Aya showed me everything that's possible. And my buddy said, don't do that. Show up. The second night, I was like, oh man, I don't know shit. I don't know anything. Everything now in my life is a theory for me to engage, explore. And if it's fear, if I find fear in something, that's how I know to lean into it.
Hey, yeah.
Not like meth, like
No, but
I haven't done heroin. Like,
no, that's actually a beautiful story about your niece, because I think that's exactly what you would do, because you get in a very vulnerable place when you're under the influence of certain. When you have alternative states of consciousness, can become very vulnerable. When you're scared, you're vulnerable. You feel vulnerable by definition because you're vulnerable to whatever scares you that could hurt you. So to shift that around and turn that aggression or fear into something loving is you can steer people, especially when they're under certain situations. It could be with drugs, medicines, whatever, or it could just be an emotional state of just like steering that in a certain direction. There's a great book by Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, called Mikey and the Dragons that we read to our kids probably 150 times. And the whole concept is that, dragons, once you confront them, are small. And we have a sign up in their room that says dragons hoard gold, that everything you want in your life, it could be success, in a monetary sense or something like that, but it's generally more just like a sense of peace and purpose and things like that are generally like guarded by something you fear most. And, all of the classic fairy tales and stuff is like confronting that dragon to get to the riches, the gold, the virgin princess, whatever it is, that kind of concept. And sometimes it's really hard to do and it's scary. And I think that having someone that's there as like a trip sitter, if you want to call it that, is someone who can just like kind of guide you through that process, who is clear-headed and everything along those lines. That's a really interesting tie-in.
And it's beautiful when we get to the point where we are our own tripper sitter. Like, I've done enough DMT and ayahuasca and all these things that there is a place for the community, the shamans. There's always also a place to be alone in your meditation.
Yeah.
And the last time I was going to take DMT alone, I loaded it up, set it on my side table by my bed, and I found myself wanting to meditate more. And I had an amazing meditation, and I didn't need it. So, psychedelics to me are like, if I need it, when I need it, if I'm called, if there's a fear or a judgment that I'm experiencing, and having all the tools like breathwork.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a breathwork teacher, facilitator, guide. I love it. I rarely do it. The breathwork I do,
it got you to where you're at now.
Yeah.
Like Wim Hof style, just for people that don't know, can you just give us like a quick understanding, the really short summary of what breathwork even is? Because people are like, I breathe. Like, what does that mean? Like, all right, I breathe. What is that? What's the big deal? Like, what is breathwork and how is it? It's very interesting. Hickson Gracie has a book called Breathe. It's like, that's a big thing is breathwork, and how it can change your life is just a simple process of learning how to breathe. So like, what is breath work? How would you define it essentially for people that are really unfamiliar?
Breathwork is so many things to so many people. For me, at the basic level, it is understanding the parasympathetic nervous system, which is breathing through your nose, or the sympathetic nervous system, which is breathing through your mouth. And we tend to be mouth breathers, which means we're always in this sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight response, very emotional. You see a kid fall down, scratch his knee, and he's like, ha, 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 ha. He's in his sympathetic nervous system. So when my kids have literally broken bones and they're sticking out of their skin, and I rush up to them, it's saying, okay, calm, you're good, you're safe, I'm here, close your mouth, breathe through your nose, slow out, 5 seconds.
Once you control your breath.
5 seconds. Activating that parasympathetic nervous system, which is, align you with your frontal cortex, which is the reasoning like, okay, it's okay, I'm aligned, I'm not in fear of the bone being broken. I can now hear that everything's going to be okay. We're going to go to the hospital. They're going to fix it. You'll be fine. You're not going to die. It's okay. Bones break. And they see the calm energy coming from somebody close to them that they trust, that helps them, relinquish a lot of the fear. So the basics of breath work is just understanding your own breath and your ability to manipulate in a good way somebody else. So when I'm coaching people, I'm like, if you're angry at your wife or husband and you're screaming at them, you are in the sympathetic nervous system of emotions and running wild. And all it does is take one other person to be breathing and say, hey, I'm present. You don't need to scream. Like, you're screaming because you don't feel heard. And I understand that. Like, I've been there, but I'm here. I'm listening. I'm actively listening. And then their vibration kind of mellows out and is heart coherence. But the breath work I do and teach is holotropic. So circular breathing, rebirthing. And I'm taking people in there and doing 2 breaths through the mouth, 1 breath out, and activating like their sympathetic nervous system. But more so, we have, the science, we have fluid in our spine or our sacrum, like sacred sacrum. And when you're doing that breath, it's not the breath that gets you there. It's the breath that is massaging the muscles in the spine and moving that fluid up to the pineal or pineal gland. And once that happens, that fluid resonates those crystals, and then your DMT. It's our natural ability to connect to source energy a little bit closer and have that psychedelic experience without psychedelics.
Yeah, I've heard that. I think Russell Brand is talking about Kundalini yoga stuff. But people do mouth tape now. They do mouth tape because it seems to be better for sleeping and stuff. But the idea that your breath can control your emotions. You said, I think I first heard this from you. You're like, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, breathe through your nose. It's very difficult to freak out breathing through your nose.
Yeah.
If you just think about it, like it's hard to do, but that's why you practice, and that's why you might need a coach. It's just like anything else. You practice it over and over and over again, so that when it's game time, you practice like a sport, and then when it's game time, you just do what you practice. So you practice the breathing, so that when it comes time that you have to tap into like calming down, using your breath to control your emotions, you're able to do it.
Look at any Olympic athlete, sprinter, ice skater. John Coyle is my good friend, silver medalist, ice skater, speed skater. If you look at them, you don't see them. Their mouth is closed, their nose, and they're breathing through their nose. And I hate running. And when I started breathing through my nose, closing my mouth, what I found was all the thoughts that come in. I hate this. This is stressful. This is hard. I'm running the same pace. I'm not sweating as much. My mind is more clear.
Yeah.
And you look at marathon runners, they all know that breathing through the nose just calms the nervous system. And because we're not meant to breathe through the mouth is a secondary bypass.
Yeah.
When we're breathing through the nose, it's a super straw.
One purpose, yeah.
Into the belly. So I'm a shallow breather. And when we're breathing through our nose, when we're making love and being intimate, once again, for men, it gets us out of our mind and into our heart. So we're more connected. And I know because I have trauma, like I couldn't do one night stands. I could do it, but it would be horrible. I'm going to, it's going to be very fast because I'm in my head worrying about everything. And when I learned that was my super gift, that I needed more, sapiosexual, I needed more connection. Then I could be, stop being like worried about, does that girl like me, or I'm going to get laid, and it's like, no, like if the vibration isn't there, I'm going to honor that.
Yeah.
Because I want to feel calm. I want to be safe. And then what I prescribe to most people in couples is to do that soul gazing, where you're actually taking the time to look into somebody's eyes and let your heart like slow down from beating so fast, especially when you're new in a relationship, and just get that heart coherence.
Yeah. Sheila, my wife, and I have done that. Like, just stare at each other's eyes for like a long period of time. You get a full range of emotions of like, this is strange. You start laughing because you remember stuff, you share that, but then it gets really intense and you sometimes start crying. And it's so simple and it's right there. And I would just wonder how many people have been married to people for a long time, decades, and they've never actually just sat and stared at each other's eyes for like a prolonged period of time, in like real concentration. It's a very interesting. So like this stuff that you're kind of into, and it's all these things. It's not just like drugs. It's all of these things. You and I we met in Denver because you're up in like the NorCal more, and I'm in Southern California. But like we met in Denver for the Psychedelic Science Conference. What a interesting mix of people, man. Like you have like 400-pound people and like, a handicapped scooter that are like trans with like purple hair wearing a bear costume. And then you have like CEO, 9-figure, tech people. And then you have a whole bunch of like doctors. And you have like college professors like Dr. Carl Hart. You have Aaron Rodgers there. It's such a crazy mix of people. This world is wild because I think there's something for everybody. And that's psychedelics as far as like the plant medicines and drugs and stuff like that. But it really isn't just about that. It's a lot of stuff that, as you said, I'm glad you went into that. Like it's just a deeper connection with whatever this reality is. And you can use chemicals to kind of jumpstart that, but you can also get to a certain understanding without those things as well. That's just a very interesting world. And the stigma still exists. If I go in on Monday and I go up to my principal, he's like, "Hey, Will, how was your weekend?" I'm like, "I got a bottle of tequila and I got just smashed. I got hammered and was like, kind of getting rowdy." He'd be like, "Whoa, that's awesome. High five." But if I was like, "You know what? I went out and I did ate a bunch of mushrooms and just like stared at the sky." It's like, what are you doing drugs for? Yeah. And like one of them is like Carl Hart's I love Carl Hart. And he said something like, we should run drug policy based on science, not based on emotions. Like alcohol is undeniably worse for you, but there's this stigma attached to it. And I think it's getting over. It's like we're at this precipice where like we're going to get through this, but it's a really interesting time. What are your thoughts on kind of where the future is going with this? Because it's a very weird time. We're like, now finally the science is coming in. The science is finally stepping in to say like, all right, what are these? Because when something is a Schedule I drug, it's very difficult to get like permission to study at a university setting. Yeah. But now it's becoming more and more what Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins is doing, what they're doing at Harvard Divinity School, Robin Carhart Harris at University of San Francisco. There's a lot of people out there doing this stuff, pushing for it, changing laws. Like I had the guys from Decriminalized Nature on. They were awesome. I think it's changing, but where's the future? What is it going to look like? I mean, what do you see that this kind of movement is headed? Like just because you're more on the inside of this than I am.
Yeah, first off, alcohol is the most socially destructive chemical that we've ever legalized, normalized, and put on commercials that you should have a beer and a pizza.
It is normalized. Like if you say I'm not drinking, it's the only like drug that if you're like, I don't drink, it's like, oh, you must have a problem.
Yeah.
You have a problem if you don't drink.
Oh yeah. And I kind of like at one point was a little bit, judgmental, like, oh, if you don't do cannabis, maybe you're just not vulnerable. Like you're not willing to look at your shadow side. And if you can't do that, how can I? But that's judgment.
It is judgment. But yeah, I understand that. I understand the judgment. But yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, it's what you said. It's mind blowing that if I said, hey, like I took 2 grams of psilocybin and hiked and had a wonderful connection with myself and with nature and with my friends, that is like, oh, you're doing drugs. But if I got shit-faced and drunk drive, but I made it home all like, hey, good day.
Maybe pop an Adderall, have a couple of cigarettes and drink some alcohol. It's like, comes in an orange pill box, buy the cigarettes at 7-Eleven, you buy the alcohol.
And this really goes into the fact that now, tin hat conspiracy theory, but the fact that the privatization of all these things and the lobbyists have made it seem to where these things are bad, these things are good. So this is social acceptable. And the war on drugs, which is an abomination of the Reagan administration, incarcerated more Black Americans, destroyed the inner city family structure. All these things that people up until, a couple of years ago with the legalization were serving time for, and other people were getting off scot-free. And there's money in it. So, right now, the future of psychedelics is making it more normalized, more accepted, more understandable, while not stripping away some of the most powerful aspects of it, which is within the culture of it, the shamanism.
Yeah.
The understanding that, like, back in the day, when you did ayahuasca, you didn't do ayahuasca. You had the shaman who was doing the ayahuasca and the Icaro, the music that was being played, that was the medicine, because music is medicine. And you were just there participating in this deep trance meditation.
It's one of many factors going into it, as opposed to like the pharmaceutical industry is kind of like there is like therapy and like SSRIs, yeah, but a lot of things are just like, it's just the pill. Just take the pill. You have this bad problem here, just take the pill. You're anxious, take the pill. Yeah, go to therapy too, maybe, but like, yeah, it's like a whole bunch of factors, not just two, but like a whole bunch. It's the music, it's the community, it's the medicine,
So the future is getting to a point where we just don't say, well, do ayahuasca. Oh, do ketamine. Like there's 1,000 ketamine clinics. That will heal you. It's really people understanding what they need fully and exploring what they need, because they may not need ayahuasca. They may not need ketamine. They may not need the Prozac. And it's really understanding like where you're at, so we don't blanket statement everybody. Because I come from a mindset of, if you are on SSRIs that don't make you have high lefts and high rights, they balance it out for you. Yeah. Those are the training wheels that you've been given. You don't learn necessarily how to balance yourself out, because you have to, duality is everything in life. You have to experience these high highs and these low lows for you, for your life, for your purpose, for your meaning, to figure out where you are. And I can't tell you how to get there. I can't tell you, oh, you should do ayahuasca because that works for me. No, you should maybe lift weights if that's your passion and you find your bliss in that. So a lot of it is going back to, I don't know shit. I don't know anything. I just have theories and I know what works for me. You find out what works for you. And if you want to push yourself beyond your limits, then maybe you get up that day and you go to the gym and you lift weights and you see slow gains, but you see yourself like, yeah, I'm doing this. Maybe that's ayahuasca. Maybe you walk into a therapy session and sit down and say, I don't know, but I know this is not working, so I need more help. So the future of everything is just being more loving, more understanding of where people are, and asking them this beautiful question that I've learned in the last year with like partner or potential partner, is showing up for them. And when they are like fucked up or when they're going through something, not prescribing what I think they need, and just simply saying, I'm here. What can I do? How can I help? What do you need? What do you need from me right now? Because that may be, I need you to leave me alone because I need space. And that's like, okay, that hurts my ego. But I should be putting your well-being, your needs before my desires. And when I get to that point, I know I'm ascending. I know I'm making good choices, because when I can put needs before desires, because the desire will be like, no, I'm hanging out with this and she's beautiful. I would love to make love to her, but is that what she needs? And then I'm manipulating situations. So that was a part of disintegrating my toxic masculinity in order to go into my femininity and then do the hardest work. Because it's easy to destroy your toxic masculinity, what you think is masculine, which is maybe hurting other people. You are now left with going into the only other polarity. That's the feminine. So you're in your feminine, you're healing and feeling what's like not use your analytical mind to override everything. But the real work is then, how do you redefine what's masculine?
Yeah.
And it takes good masculine men and people to be around you. It takes listening to the feminine on what they want and what they need. And when I did that as a process, always in motion, for the first time in my life, I found that I could be around women. And like David Dieta says, like, the masculine is always going to be attracted to the feminine, no matter what. Doesn't matter. What you do with that attraction is not good or bad. It's just your choice. And I started making choices of like, I'm not going to be that little boy who's afraid of not being loved and desired and wanted. So I manipulate situations because she's pretty, and if she thinks I'm cool and she likes me, oh my God, I love you. I'm going to do everything for you. Abandoning myself and my boundaries, and boundaries are self-love. And I came to a point where it was like, whoa, I can be around women and be like their brother. be like their father. And that happened in ayahuasca when I was literally sitting in a hot tub, and there's beautiful women all around me. And for the first time, I wasn't like slipping my ring off, because I would do that. I was that douchey guy. And for the first time, I'm seeing and feeling like they're clamoring around me.
It's a deeper level
Yeah.
to connect with people. Yeah.
And for the first time, I was like proud to have a partner, my ex-wife. So even though it's the ex-wife, it's the consistency of knowing you. And regardless of what anybody else does, I know me. So when I make good choices and good decisions, I can feel validated that I'm a good person. And so now I make these choices lovingly with knowing myself, and I feel good about it. But people that have never done that, naturally, they don't know what's on the other side, because they know the desire, and the desire feels good. So we are led by our desires and not good judgment.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, I've had a bunch of podcasts on like the kind of changing masculinity. I did 2 back-to-back with Ryan Michler from the Order of Man. I think it's a big podcast. I had Stefanos Stefandos on. Then more recently, I had Johnny L. Sasser on. He's like a former Army Ranger and stuff. They all talk about this idea of like men getting a community of other men to do hard shit, manly shit, and out through that process, show more vulnerability, show more emotion, and get in touch with that to steer that aggressiveness away from something that would be deemed toxic. Toxic masculinity gets thrown around all the time. The same energy that you have to kick in the door to harass your ex-girlfriend is the same energy to kick in the door to save a child in a burning building. So how do we steer it properly? I guess the last thing that I just wanted to like talk to you about, because it was really frustrating when we were at the Psychedelic Science Conference. I was really interested in how we can change the way that for recreational use, because right now recreational use of cannabis is legalized. Some people think it's good for recreation. Some people don't. Some people think it's more for like meditation and tuning in something or watching a movie than it is for just like partying. Some people like to party on it. We have alcohol, tobacco, and there's a lot of drugs and stuff like that. But like what they do is they drugs in general are going to hack your brain chemicals. So they're going to, release the dopamine when my kids are upset or they're happy, helping them to recognize that it's just brain chemicals, not to discount their feelings, but like just understanding what's going on. Is I was asking people, because MDMA is an interesting one. MDMA is a very interesting compound that basically floods your happy chemicals so that you can lower your walls. It's great for PTSD because people can like talk about trauma and not have other walls up. It's great for connection. It's great for a lot of things. And I was asking people, I think you were with me, and I was asking like someone, I was like, how dangerous is this? I asked several people, and I'm not trying to compare it to like going out on a Saturday night and you want to do MDMA and listen to music. How bad is that for your health, your brain health, not compared to like celery, like compared to what the alternative would be, which would be like 2 shots of whiskey, 3 beers, and 4 cigarettes. Like, I want to know what it is, because I think that there are healthy people that still like to have alternative states of consciousness. I think there's a lot of very healthy people in this space. And it's like, how do I get alternative states of consciousness, a flood of dopamine or serotonin or whatever it is, and do it in as safe a way as possible? It's very difficult to get that information, but like, I want to know at these doses, here's where alcohol is safe, here's where it gets dangerous. In these doses, here's where cocaine, heroin, MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, meth, mescaline, I don't care. I just want data, and then allow adults in the land of the free in America. I'm thinking, because just going back to the question I asked you about the future, is like, the question is like, we educate the youth on this, and then we say like, all right, so you have all the information. Here's where drinking alcohol gets really gnarly for you. Here's where you're impaired to this degree. And when you do mescaline, it's going to change because everyone's biology is different for sure. Everyone has different emotional triggers for sure. But I want to know, how dangerous is this stuff compared to the stuff out there? And it's very frustrating that there's not a lot of information. Like even like Rick Doblin stuff are like, well, it doesn't look like, and Andrew Huberman talked about MDMA, and he's like, there's no evidence to show it's neurotoxic. They did people in the LDS, like Mormons, because they don't even drink coffee. And people did up to like 400 different experiences with MDMA, and they showed no neurotoxicity. What does that mean? Does that mean it's safe? Can you do it every Friday and Saturday night? Like, how is that going to affect you? I'm not recommending that by any stretch, but the frustration I have is the lack of information, I suppose, is what I'm getting to.
I'm having name drop. I'm having brunch with Rick tomorrow.
Ask him.
I'll ask him,
Yeah.
and I don't have all the answers.
You understand my question? Like, it's very frustrating that I just want to know what is true so that I can make a judgment. I'm a rational thinking adult. Let me make the judgment about what I put in my body. But if you don't tell me what I put in my body, then how do I know?
Yeah, I think we're at the forefront, and that's the whole point of Psychedelic Science Conference, is bringing the best of the best and the people that don't know anything to learn and understand, and all the trials, clinical trials that are going on to understand these compounds and how they work. And what I find interesting and fascinating is you have MDMA, which is a heart opener, and then you have ketamine, which is more of a dissociative, like frontal masculine medicine. And MDMA, I think it was more like a feminine medicine, and they both have their place, because when we talk about trauma, from my understanding and experience and just understanding myself and what I've gone through, is when we talked about this, a traumatic event happens, and the emotion tied to that, we bottle up and compartmentalize it, because that's too much. It's too much.
Yeah.
But the memory is because we're devoting brain power. So I'm not going to feel this. I felt it. I'm closing it up, compartmentalizing it, locking it away in a vault, and I forget about it. But I have the memory.
Process it.
Yeah, super focused, hyper-focused memory. I remember every detail, and I can move past that memory because it's just a memory. And then I live my life with my coping mechanisms that I'm highly unaware of. And one day I'm triggered, and that that feeling, that emotion that I felt during the trauma is unlocked. And I didn't even know, I'd forgotten about it. And then the dissonance of how I feel and what I remember. Do I remember everything was true? Because there's two different realities, the perpetrator, my reality, and all the crazy stuff in between. There's such a high level of cognitive dissonance that we get trapped in these loops of telling ourselves the story, not really understanding how we feel. And so ketamine has been amazing for a person that is on the other end of that. They feel it. Their memory is maybe spotty on what happened, but the emotion is...
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
There, highly charged. So ketamine, in my understanding, is ketamine silences the emotion so you can more logically deal with the memory and get to a place where, like, that was bad, but I'm good. Okay. MDMA is the exact opposite. Like, that helps you get into feeling and deal with the feeling, because maybe you're very alpha, you're not vulnerable. This memory is overriding you and you don't know how you feel. That's why you're drinking. That's where you're masking. That's where you're doing drugs, beating your wife and yelling at the kids, because you don't know how you feel. Like, and as a man, I don't understand this because I'm not in my feminine. And then the MDMA comes along and says, hey, okay, feel it. Feel it. What is it, that feeling? Usually it's, there's base emotions off of every trauma: fear, abandonment, disillusionment, anger, all these things. And so you can do that in talk therapy. It takes a lot longer to get there, but there's no bad place to go as long as you're getting help.
You're working on it. Yeah, I mean, you can get there with therapy, just like you can get over PTSD without these chemicals and these medicines, but it's faster. Stanislav Grof had a great quote. It was something like, psychedelics are to psychology and understanding the brain what the microscope is to biology and understanding cells, and the telescope is to astronomy and understanding the universe. Like, that's a bold statement, but that seems to be true. Dave, this is really a great conversation. I knew it would be. Where can people kind of tap into your stuff, reach out to you if they're interested in kind of going down this road? Because that is what you've dedicated your time to. You've built successful businesses, and now you can kind of just do your thing. And it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, man. It's really, really great. Where can people keep up with what you're doing? Social media, contact information. What's kind of on the horizon for you?
Yeah, the best place to reach me at is david.gregory.casler on my IG and follow me. And even that's ever changing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful life that I've been given. And more so, it's a beautiful life that I've taken charge of and said, this is how I want to live my life. And no matter how I feel, I can be blown up, go through a divorce. I'm still that guy that says, I can't wait to get married.
You've had low lows in your life and high highs. Like the highs have been really high for you. You have 6 children and like the joy that they gave you in these experiences of being all around the world and stuff. And then low lows from divorce and war and trauma as a child. Like there's the spectrum of what life is. I mean, you're living life, you know, I mean, it's a roller coaster, but the roller coaster is more exciting than the merry-go-round, you know?
And I'm grateful for all
Yeah.
live in the duality to find balance. And every day I live my life authentically and exploratorily. I get closer to finding more balance. And from that balance, who I am, then I just become a better person.
Yeah.
And people around me can enjoy that instead of me being, you know, the man I used to be, which was like, hey, I built businesses, I got money, but I'm insecure that I didn't do enough, that I'm not enough. And now it's like, fuck, we're all enough. We are all enough. And you define what enough is. And you can stop right now. I could stop right now, delete my Instagram, find my partner, my soulmate, and live in a cabin. But I could also fucking go out for an acting interview because that's what I want to do. I define what I want to do. I define my life. Yeah, it's a good place to be.
Beautiful, man. All right. Well, thank you for coming on here, sharing your story and bringing us in a little bit about this kind of this new world that seems like for our kids is going to be a lot more mainstream. And I think it's long overdue with everything that happened in the 1960s. I think it's long overdue that we start to figure ourselves out and heal some of this collective trauma as well. So Dave, it's been great having this conversation with you, man.
Brother.
Yeah, appreciate you. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Hey there, Cylinder Radio listeners. If you like the approach that I take on the podcast and social media and want to try and implement some of the strategies that I use to have productive conversations on challenging topics, check out my free downloadable guide, Debate to Dialogue. It's available on my website, williamroosh.com/debate to dialogue.